And my story is really, if I had to sum it up, I would say it's going from greed to generosity. I grew up in the Silicon Valley. I was working at Sun Microsystems in the sort of heydays of .com era. And I just saw that, like, the whole culture, all the peers around me, they were just chasing one thing after another, after the third. And for me, I just got to a point where I said, no, that's a little empty. And I said, well, what else? If I'm not going to try to accumulate and gather and grab, what else can I do? And I started giving. And the more I gave, the more I wanted to give, the more I came alive. And I said, wow, there's really something here. And so that's been my journey. Along the way, we started an organization called ServiceSpace in my early 20s. Never done anything like it. Didn't know how to organize or run a whole massive institution. But it started with 4 of us, and now it's this massive global movement. And it just kind of fell in our laps, and we're learning as we go. So I think what happens when you have a very strong taker culture instead of a giver culture, what happens is you start to say, well, I'm not just going to take from people in my company. I actually want to take from the commons of the world. And you start to game the systems. And you have so many examples of this, right? Like Volvo cheating on the emissions test, or Uber creating this gray ball, which is a way for them to cheat the government. And when you say, well, how can you have companies that are actually more ethical, that think about ethics? And one basic answer is, well, we need regulation for that. But I think that's not really going to go too far, right? How do you actually create a culture of a company that realizes that I don't want to have a taker kind of a mindset, because that taker kind of a mindset is not going to help me go too far. So I think if you move from a taker culture to a giver culture, you will invariably do things that are socially responsible. But before you even start to think about society at large, you will start to think about your employees and their well-being. Right? That'll be the first step of an ethical company. Then you will start to look and say, how can I help those employees start to go out and do so many other things in their community? And that in turn will create a culture of deep and profound ethics. So I think it's I think it's an easy, to say, oh, how can we have more ethics? Well, let's just have more regulations and force people to do certain things. But that is not real transformation. I think you have to I think the leaders of companies, of existing companies, have to ask these questions and say, how do I amplify the consistent contributors, create a giver culture, and how can that ripple out into the world? And there are some fascinating examples of leaders who do this, right? Like Malden Mills is this giant mill in the U.S., and there was this big fire, and the company had to shut down, and they had a choice. The CEO had a choice: do I give all my employees insurance? Do I retain their insurance even when the company is shut down? He didn't have to by law. But he's like, these are people, my grandfather started this company. This is a multi-generational company. We care for our thousands of employees. Like, these are like our family members. I can't shut their insurance at a time like this. He kept it going. His board comes and says, you do this, you're going to sink the company. And he says, that's okay. If that's what it means, I want to do the giving sort of a thing, because that's the core value of our company. And so you see examples like this of people that aren't, forget even forced to be ethical, that can even take the lesser route, but they actually take this, magnanimous approach. So I think you have examples of this, and I think it's very much possible. And I think it's an invitation for all of us to step into that.